Welcome to my channel. I'm Hannah and I thought it's been a while since I made a Pokémon doll. I've had Delphox on my mind for a while and figured she would work well as a spacer here on YouTube since the next two dolls will be rather big projects and they need more time. Instead, I made Delphox ridiculously complicated. Anyway, I started with this Spectra Wondergeist. Her joints were good, the only flaws were the glue in the hair and the yellowing of her hands. I start off cutting her hair close to the scalp. She would look wicked with side cuts, by the way. I need to log that idea. Then I scrape out the hair from the plugs with a blunt screwdriver. This is really satisfying. And now she's ready for some neurosurgery. I cut the back of her head with an X-Acto knife to access the hair. For me, this is much easier than trying to pull it through the neck. Ugh, this was sticky. I rub off the paint with acetone using cotton pads and Q-tips. It's been a while since I made a Pokémon doll, as I said. The last one was Frostlass, which I made in December last year for an Ice Pokémon collab, if I remember it correctly. Now the face is ready to be primed with MSC before the face-up. I just had to show my impeccable symmetry. Totally could have skipped this part, but look how bad this is. In the end, I think the eraser did half the work on this custom. Anyway, as usual, I start with the outline and then fill in the iris. I'm aware my last custom had red eyes, and I try not to repeat myself, but Delphox has red eyes, and I wanted to stick to that. By the way, last year in August, I made a Tropius repaint who also had red eyes. I made the wings out of paper super easy and fun to make. Painting Spectra is always a challenge for me since she has paper white skin. I used to use a dark brown soft pastel for shading, but it looked like she had been crawling through a mole tunnel, which isn't the effect I'm looking for. Instead, first adding yellow and then red, I get a soft blush, then I go back in with some blue pastel to cool it down a bit. I'm still mixing things around and I try new stuff. Mixing skin color is quite complex, especially when there is no skin color from the beginning. Kitty Demue, who has a black skin tone without any shades, is another challenge to paint. I made a dark rye repaint as a commission a year ago and I tried to shade, but it just didn't show. I'm super happy how she turned out anyway. I decided early on that she would get orange hair, hence the eyebrow color, then I wanted her to look angry, but I messed it up and she got some kind of scar instead. Story time! I made a Chauncey in July last year. Someone bought it and I didn't notice that the person hadn't paid for her. This was on Etsy, by the way, until I was on my way home from sending her away. I still feel stupid about it, but I hope she ended up in a good home. I'm not mad about it, it was my mistake and I own it as such. While I'm at it, this is my first Pokémon custom ever, Fluffy. I sculpted her horns and the tail out of paper clay. In March of 2019, I didn't have any epoxy clay. It worked pretty well, but it was heavy and one had to be careful so the tail wouldn't break. Here I'm adding black pastels to darken some areas both above and below the eyes, then I use the blue pastels. Third and second to last layer, here I'm all about enhancing colors and brighten some areas. Again, I start with yellow and then add some red. In the final layer I also added some blue because it was too warm. Then I decided to outline the lips with a pencil. Some skin imperfections, pores and thin blue veins make her a bit more realistic. I hold the pencil really light while making the veins, but they still turn out a bit too sharp in my opinion. Next time I'll use a lighter blue or go over it with an eraser a little bit. Fourth and final layer, time for the acrylics. I've started to add lighter colors to the lashes to give them some dimension, and I think I'll do that to all my customs from now on. Here I use first a light yellow and then orange to both over and under lashes. Then I use the same colors for the eyebrows. Then I use white acrylics for highlighting and to paint the glossy parts. And here we have it, the face-up is finished! Now to cover it all with a mask, hehe. I use another Spectra head to sculpt the mask on, but first I cover it with glue, so the mask is easy to remove in the end. I don't know if it's necessary, but I don't dare to gamble on this part. This is part A of the control cast. It kind of feels like dry kinetic sand. Part B on the other hand is more of a gummy sticky kind. I mix them 1-to-1 by weight. I kind of just stick it to the face and then sculpt first the base and then the ears. Control cast has a shorter working time but is much lighter than epoxy clay, so I think the positive outweighed the negative in this case. It takes 24 hours for it to harden, so I hung it upside down. This is when I started on the face up, if I remember correctly. The whole process of making this custom is warped. I switched between parts, so I'm glad I can edit it all together in one long logical video. Here you can see how I did the second layer of control cast. I filled in some cracks and added the bushy whiskers things on the sides. I have a hard time finding Dremel tools that are fine-grained, if that makes sense, so this is how I make my own. I cut a strip of sanding paper and glue it on, super easy, but it needs to get changed every once in a while. It looks like it went smooth, but I had super glue all over my gloves. Then I went on sanding. I use a mask to filter the particles. They aren't fine as dust, but I still don't want them in my lungs. No, thank you. Taking the mask off was a piece of cake though. Some glue was still stuck on the inside, so I took that off and then took the mask to my homemade airbrush station. This looks creepy. I finally bought myself an airbrush. which has been a dream of mine since I was a teenager. This means that I'm still a newbie at it, so no judging, okay? I give the mask a too thick coat of light yellow paint. Here I should have given it 3 thinner coats with drying time between. Oops. So don't do it like me, just don't. I used acrylics to paint the mask, but it dissolved the airbrush paint, and the airbrush paint kind of melted and stuff. If it was because the paint sucked or if I just put too much paint there, I will never know. I ended up redoing it though, but this time I sprayed a layer of MSC after airbrushing. The paint cracked, which made me sad, but then I thought it looked pretty cool. So I filled it in with acrylics. Perfect time to let the wrist loose and draw some squiggly lines. In the end, I also used some soft pastels to give it some shading. I used yarn in the ears to give them the fluff that Delphox has, but I ended up airbrushing the outer strands for it to give it the proper color. Delphox has these fox feet, so I wanted to sculpt it on Spectra. For this I used epoxy clay after sanding the feet for the clay to stick to them. I divided equal parts of the clay to ensure that the sizes of the toes were even, and then I just squished them on. After curing, I used my X-Acto knife and a fine grit sandpaper. I mixed some dark grey paint and spray painted both feet and hands. Before I sprayed it down with MSC, I did some blushing on her. I tried to give her abs, but I don't know if I succeeded. I've gotta practice my ab blushing. I had this idea for a pair of pleated pants. The fabric I used was a tad too thick, I think, but in the end it gave a really nice effect. It took some pattern modifying though, which I'm not ready to explain how, because I'm not sure I understand it myself, to be honest. Now I need one more of these and 2 reversed. Bam! Since the fabric was so thick, I decided to sew the pleats. First, the ones on the inside, gotta pin them all to the sewing machine. And now to pin and sew the outside pleats. Then for the crotch, and after that the inner legs. This way one can adjust the outer seams to fit perfectly to the doll. As you can see, the pants became ridiculously low cut, but that's okay since I'll be adding 2 panels of white fabric. The kind of are Hakama inspired. These ornaments were made out of polymer clay and airbrushed. I just used super glue to stick them to the pants. Then I thought they looked too brand new and pressed, so I tried wrinkling them up a bit with the help of some water. The top also got its own pattern. Take masking tape, stick it in pieces on a scrap doll body, draw the seams and cut them with an X-Acto knife, form-fitting and fast. So first I sew the crinkle thing on the side of her chest and a seam on the shoulder, like this. Then I've skipped some steps, but ultimately I sew the waist, glue the hem of the arms and front, then added some ruffles to imitate Delphox tail. It would have been cool with a fluffy tail, but it wouldn't have fitted the concept, and well, I didn't have any yellow fur at home. In the end I also added a collar and some ornaments, but that will show in the final picture. I wanted her to have a shaved head, so I made a pile of flocking from yarn. It turns out so fluffy and soft. To get rid of pieces, I cut it in sections, honestly. This I do for fun. Then I glue the incision before I paint the sculpt with glue. This is basic crafting glue, nothing magical. I prefer using this thicker one as one has more control over where it ends up. I also took the opportunity to give her a heart-shaped hairline. After the glue, I start adding flocking and doubting my decisions. She will look like Pennywise for a while, but that's okay. We have to have faith in the process. So now it will have to dry before another layer of glue and flocking is added. Before the second layer, excess flocking is gently brushed up. At this point I was like, Annie Lennox, is that you? And then I realized that I've made a Lennox Delphox. Like, yeah, that happened. Me, being the lazy person that I am, tried taking the excess off by using a stretchy fabric over the vacuum cleaner nozzle. It worked like wonders. No flocking all over the place, no fuzzy brush. And then I cut off some strands sticking out. Time to give the mask its harness. I was debating if I should add elastics or give it a cool leather harness, the cool leather harness won, and I'm glad it did. I used a ring and faux leather strips, gluing it all together. To give it a perfect fit, I had the mask on the head with tape and plastic wrapper underneath. And look at this! Ugh! I hate making these stupid mistakes, but I fixed it. And here it is. It's super easy to get it off, but it stays on well. Next and last, I made the stick with a fire. I wanted to be able to post the fire, so I took a wooden bead as a base and made it into a joint, basically. I used orange yarn for this too, which I airbrushed for it to look more like fire. I sped this up by 5, by the way. This thicker wire comes from a discarded writing pad. I collect a lot of things that are considered trash and use them in my crafting. Then I used flora tape to make it look like a stick. It's a little bit loose at its middle position, but that's fine, it poses well. So this turned into a Lennox Delphox. She's the coolest ever, so I don't mind at all, but this is such a perfect example of how the creative process can lead you to places you never expected. I like looking back at what I started with, and here she is before her customization adventure, and here she is now. My little Delphox, and look, she actually got some abs! I really enjoyed the process, and I think she turned out pretty unique. She fits the autumn season too, which is a plus, my autumn Lennox Delphox. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more videos in the future. I think I have ideas that will last to next summer. Do you have any idea for another Pokemon doll? Any feedback you'd like to share? Let me know in the comments. And thanks again for watching. Bye!